I've got 4 developers here who are working in various regions of the world. Several of them here in New York City area have successfully completed Passive House certified projects. Steve Bluestone of the Bluestone organization here in New York. Timothy McDonald of Onion Flats out of Philadelphia area. Michael Levy of the Grosvenor organization in London. And Stuart Osborne from Nava, also here. Nava, also here in New York. And we're going to have ask each one of them to present for between 7 and 9 minutes and 55 seconds. And then I'll shoot out a few questions, get a conversation going, and then hopefully also open up questions to the room as well. Steve is going to discuss his work and present his slides first. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Can you hear me in the back? Can you hear me? Yes? All right. First of all, I just want to correct something Stuart said. We have not successfully completed a Passive House project yet. In fact, I'd like to know how many in the room have done a full-fledged passive and got the certification. I'm just curious. Great. Well, okay, thank you. So we're in the other group where we put our hands up and say, well, we're trying to get there, but we haven't gotten there yet. My company's been around for 78 years. It's a family-owned business, and for most of those 78 years, we built really standard, crappy buildings when it came to energy. Typical formula for us was a block and plank building, metal studs, 3.5 inches of fiberglass that did nothing, and we moved people in it, and today we're heating those apartments maybe $700 per winter, I guess. So we changed the formula back in 2009 and started building greener buildings, and one of those buildings this past winter was costing about $200 an apartment. So we're in the right direction, 200 apartment per heat. So we caught the passive bug, and now we have 3 different projects in planning. One of them you can see on the screen. It's the largest one, and it's due to break ground in 2 weeks. Another year and a half from now, we'll see people move in. The biggest difference between the crappy buildings and the new buildings is essentially the envelope. And you can see the team. Some of those folks are in the room, mostly aren't, but what you'll see is basically a wall with no holes in it except for the windows. And our old buildings had lots of holes in them. So the formula changed beginning with the structure and the envelope. Basically an ICF form, and there's some behind the curtain over there. We've built 9 buildings to date using the system. This next project that we're going to bring up, we hope to Passive House level, we're using the same system, but we're putting more foam on. The modeling showed that we needed an R30, so we needed more foam, but that was it, R30. So what you're seeing there, whether it's that product or someone else's manufacturer, is basically going to be behind the bricks and stucco for the whole building. And what that does for us, when we had the block building, we had to put on something on the blocks for water, air, vapor barrier. We had to put the insulation for thermal. We had a whole kinds of different trades doing it, and with this system we found to be very cost competitive with the blocks. We're getting everything in one, plus we're getting the studs built into the foam. So it was a win-win for us. So the formula starts out with the envelope, and then we have the next part of the formula, as you all know. I'm preaching to the crowd here, but I'll just go through this. So it seems to me like the recipe and the formula is so simple. You got to get a good envelope with the structure and the walls. You got to seal around the windows. And we just sat around a couple days ago trying to figure out exactly how in this passive house building we're going to seal it up. And obviously there's the tape products, there's some foam products, rolls of foam, and then there's caulks. And what we decided on was not to go with the tape or the foam, but we're actually going to go with the caulk product. Katrine, who's somewhere in the room over there, Katrine or Lisa, who works over there, someone said that Prosoco has a good product that doesn't shrink, and some other teams in the West Coast had success with it. So we're going to give that a try to help complete the envelope. So the other big piece of it is, of course, ventilation. And I think one of the other presentations showed the air going up to the roof, and then the Chris and Henry going through the sidewall, and of course now we're going to the ERVs. And unlike what Luke Falk was talking about earlier with one central system, we're choosing to go with individual systems, one for every apartment, ventilated out of the sidewall. So we've been doing some shopping, and it'll be one of the units on the screen when we make that decision. I don't have a slide up, but obviously the other part of the formula, one of the other parts is the lighting. So we're doing a lot of LED. I don't think we're doing all LED, but we're doing a lot of LED to bring the loads down. And then one of the other surprising things, I think it's off the screen a little bit. Oh no, you can see it there, is the modeling on this building, which is 101 apartments, 7 stories tall, showed that we did not need a third layer of glass, which was really surprising to us. We do have to improve upon the glazing coefficient for the solar heat gain, and the gas inside's got to be, I can't remember, I don't know all these things in my heart, but argon filled, I guess. So, but that was a shock and a surprise and really helpful. Again, in my bio, it mentions that we try to build buildings at no extra cost and get to these levels, and we're really, before we got involved in this, we were hitting that mark at very little extra cost, and the only thing that's going to increase our cost now on the new project is essentially the ERV, a little bit better of a window, and it's a minimal bump up from the double glazed regular window to a double glazed window with the right coatings and the gas, and a little on the lighting, and that's pretty much it. When we get done at that point in time, we'll end up with one of these plaques on the wall. I'm colorblind. I don't care whose plaque it is, but we want to get to the passive house level, and I know there's 2 ways to do it. So I guess a couple of other things about this new building coming up. One of the reasons we do like the product, the insulated concrete form, is that it's very, very strong. And if those of you who are in the New York area remember about a year ago, we had an explosion in Harlem. The little building next door to it, if you go on Google and look it up, the little building next door was ours. It was a 4-story building put up with these blocks, and that building did really well. It needed a lot of work inside. That was because of asbestos dust and lead dust and mold, because some of the roof got torn, but the walls of the building did amazingly well, and that massive explosion was just a few inches, not feet, a few inches from our building. So it's durable, it's resilient. This new building, and I guess I could go back to the slide in the beginning to show you. If I go backwards, how do I do that? Just if I want to go backwards. I can't go backwards. Okay. Well, you saw it before. But anyway, the new building has another penalty where we are off the ground, essentially. We're about several hundred feet away from the ocean. So we're on a crawl space or over an unheated garage. So somehow or other we think we're going to get to passive house level, even though we have to do all that extra work with the insulation underneath. And it looks like I did go backwards. So some of the other bells and whistles that we're kind of hoping to throw into this project, and some of them are still up for grabs, are on the screen there. CHP, cogeneration. I don't know, outside of solar thermal, how any other way that we're going to make hot water without burning gas in this building. And solar hot water on this scale, I'm not sure you can do it just by that with 101 families and 130-something bathrooms. So we do bring gas into the building only for heating hot water. In this case, it'll be cogeneration, so we'll get electricity out of it and hot water. We're planning to put PV across the whole roof. I think it's going to be a 60 or 70 kW system. Upper right-hand corner on the screen is equipment from sub-metering companies. So we do master meter and sub-metered electric. It just helps bring the costs down. Below that is a water meter, and this is the very first time we're going to do this. We're actually going to meter the water for every apartment, and we're going to have 2 water meters per apartment, and we're hoping one day that the funding and financing agencies will let us actually take the water costs away from the landlord and put it directly to the tenants with a fair exchange of lowering the rent, because that should save on water consumption and also on the energy to heat that water. We're looking at battery storage. That's the picture in the middle to help with shaving peak loads. And if we can get away with it, maybe some wind. And that funny looking tree is from a French company. And they have little leaves that look like windmills. So brings me to the closing slide, which is just basically a summary of everything I just talked about. I guess there's one other point. Our windows, because our walls are fat, and I think it was Katrine or someone told me once, passive house buildings are fat buildings because the walls are thick. So we're taking advantage of that, pulling the windows in to create a little bit of an eyebrow effect to help with shading. And I think that's all I have.
We'll move right down the line, if that's good with you, gentlemen. I lost my place. To Timothy McDonald from Onion Flats in Philadelphia, and this is
Great.
I've seen this project before.
I'm going to stand, if you don't mind. Okay. Okay, as usual, I have way too many slides, but I speak very quickly. The first three slides are slides that motivate me. The first one is that 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions come from urban environments. The second is that by 2030, we will build worldwide 900 billion square feet of buildings. That is equivalent to all of the square footage of every building in the United States times 3.5. And the third is this little number that I just learned about. I just thought it was a number, but I actually just found out that the 38 kBs per square foot per year actually refers to the 66% chance of raising the temperature of the Earth by less than 2 degrees Celsius. So in other words, it's a bank account. If we don't build to this standard, then we don't have a chance. We have a 44% chance of destroying the planet. Or yeah, 33, sorry. Anyway, just quickly, I'm actually not going to talk about our development. I'm going to talk about a project that I'm working on, but I'm going to show you very quickly some work that we've done. But Onion Flats is a development company. We're also an architecture firm and a construction company, so we're a design, build, development company. But I also teach at Temple University, and I've started this thing called the Architecture Research Center there. That's actually what I'm going to focus on more. But our projects over the years have been these urban infill projects in the middle of Philadelphia. At the time, we were interested in what we knew, which was LEED. This was the first LEED platinum set of duplexes in the country. This was a pilot project in Syracuse. First time we built to the Passive House standard. And then there are numerous projects that we're working on that are all, from this point forward, built to the Passive House standard of multiple scales. This is a community, this is a senior housing facility. This is a 27-unit townhome development in Philadelphia. It's almost completed now. We hit the blower door test on the first set of units. This is about a 100-unit project right next to our office in Kensington. Here are some images of that along the L. There's an L right in front of it. This is a 147-unit project that we've been trying to get off the ground for several years. We're almost there along the Schuylkill River in Philadelphia. Designed as a modular building, but now that's going to be changed. And most importantly, this is the project that really motivated me to do what I'm doing now, and that's the project that I want to talk about. But this was the first Passive House certified project in Pennsylvania. It's 3 units. It's an affordable housing project, subsidized housing project. We kind of created a modular building system that meets the Passive House standard. We hit blower door tests of 0.4 on this project. That's kind of what it looks like. And that's it from above with a 5 kW PV system. But I don't want to talk about this work. I want to talk about the fact that this one project got me thinking. We built this project for $130 a square foot. We didn't have any more money to spend on this than typical affordable housing developers building in Philadelphia. So it got me thinking, what is affordable housing? How does it work? And why, if we could do this, why wouldn't all affordable housing be built to this standard? I take on naive things like this, but often. But in this case, I said, well, I need to dig a little bit deeper. So what is affordable housing? How does it work? How do you finance affordable housing? And I found this myriad of ways in which it's done at the state level, at the federal level, at the municipal level. But I focused in on the State Housing Finance Agency within Pennsylvania and discovered that there are housing finance agencies in every single state, which I'll talk about in a minute, and that is the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency. Now, so I gathered together, and some of them are here, 25 stakeholders, I call them, from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, developers, architects, passive house people, folks from the mayor's office of both cities, and we went to Harrisburg, where PHFA is. PHFA funds most affordable housing in the state, specifically tax credit projects. Gathered these folks together, and we made a kind of bold proposition. Make all affordable housing net zero energy capable by 2030. And they didn't say no. And to use Passive House as the tool to get there. So, they didn't say no because they said, you know what? We have requirements in our guidelines, and developers have met those requirements, and we've been needing to raise the bar for a long time. So yes, let's do that. So we looked at a very specific and very large portion of the affordable housing industry, the low-income housing tax credit program, and with their what's called the qualified allocation plan. Every state has one of these, and that qualified allocation plan is quite simply the guidelines, the kind of baseline requirements that a developer has to meet, as well as additional ways that they can get points to be funded. So it's a point-based system, 130 points total. Every state is very similar to this. But here's the key, and this is the absolute most important slide here. 25% of all applications get funded, which means it's extremely competitive, which means that is the tool that we realized we had at our disposal, and PHFA agreed. So because it was extremely competitive, PHFA said, we're allowed to do whatever we think is appropriate, and we want to raise the bar. Here's how we're going to raise the bar. And this is how we did it. By inserting one paragraph into their 50-page long qualified allocation plan that created a new category of points, what I call the Passive House points, 10 points for Passive House certification. And kind of, well, hold on. So we got this inserted into their qualified allocation plan. It went out to developers, and we created this thing I call the PHFA project. It went out to developers. How much time? 3 minutes, very quick. And here's what happened. On October 2015, Passive House points introduced. February, 85 multifamily project applications were received. In June, 39 projects were awarded funding. However, here's the great thing. 38% of all applications came in as Passive House projects. 7 Passive House projects were awarded funding about 3 weeks ago. That means 422 new residential units will be built in Pennsylvania over the next year. And the costs were negligibly different from the year before. What do I mean by that? Here's what I mean. This is a list of every project. The yellow and the orange are the Passive House projects. This is all the costs associated with them. Here's what it boiled down to. 85 projects applied. 32 passive house projects came in at $169 a square foot. All the other projects, non-passive house projects, came in at $165 a square foot, less than 2% difference. In Philadelphia, 23 projects, 7 came in as passive house projects. Average cost of $213. Average cost of non-passive house projects, $204. 4% difference. 422 new units in Pennsylvania in 1 year. Affordable housing. But the great thing is developers, architects, and engineers that are doing affordable housing, they're also doing market rate housing. So they're all being trained for the same thing. Market transformation is what's about to happen, is in the affordable housing world. Oh, and then approach 35, 1 minute. Approach 35, I'm approaching 35 other housing finance agencies because the same mechanism exists. And here they are. I'm going to really go through fast. New York just said that they're working with us to introduce passive house into the funding process. Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, all meetings, I'm sure you can read that. Maine, Ohio, Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota, going to Minnesota, have 2 meetings there this month. Iowa, same thing. They invited me to come give a presentation. I'm going to sell them. South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, Idaho, Utah, Washington's totally open. I'm going to meet them in June, end of June. Oregon, Nevada, California, and Alaska. This is where I'm focusing this year. Next, get that paragraph in every one of their QAPs. Why? Because then we're done. Right? And I'm 20 seconds more. And here's the thing. So that's what I'm going to do this year, 35 states. But also, I'm trying to set up this center at Temple University, the Architecture Research Center. And I'm trying to get product manufacturers and professionals to partake in helping me build a database of manufacturers, systems, professionals, construction companies that people can come to and say, who builds passive houses? It'll all be there. So help me do that. Thank you.
That's a great vision. So we're going to go from there to across the pond, if you will. Michael Levy from Grosvenor. Now Grosvenor, and I don't get to say this very often about organizations, so sorry, I'm going to take the wind away from you. The company Michael works for owns properties on the scale of 300 years. So their view of what it means to build and invest in sustainability and real estate at all is a little bit different than the rest of us, and great opportunity to learn from.
Where's the clicker? Which one is it? Just press that, yeah. Okay, I'm Mike Levy. I'm from the UK, and I'm very pleased to be here. We're going to show you a bit of what we're doing in London. We're not doing anything on this scale here, and a bit of who we are. Grosvenor, we're a privately owned company. We have one shareholder. We're not a limited company. We're not a public company. We have 17 offices in 11 countries, assets in 16 countries, and an awful lot of assets we manage. However, this is where I work. I work in Mayfair and Belgravia, the prime real estate areas of London. If you're looking for the equivalent, I suppose you're looking at the Hamptons, similar sort of area around in the US. So we have 300 acres, and we've had 300 acres since 1620. We started developing it in 1720. We have 5,000 properties, 1,100 are listed, although most of the others sit in the conservation area. We're quite limited what we can do. And just as here's some figures here, but just as a target, in 2050, 90% of our properties will have been built in 1870 or before. So we have huge problems with solid walls, 12-inch, 18-inch solid walls, all the problems you traditionally have. So in 2050, we have a bigger problem than we have now. This is why this is the challenge we have. I'm sure I don't have to run through that. These are our goals: to reduce carbon by 50% in all properties by 2030, 100% of properties compliant with the British Energy Act, which is harder than you might think. And most importantly, to improve the well-being of occupiers. We don't sell properties. We are a developer and we are a client as well. So even though we develop, I am the client and I develop for the company, we retain the properties. We do not sell. We rent the properties on a yearly leases. So all properties remain with the family where they've been since 1670. Sorry. Okay. So of the 150 to 200 units we retrofit each year, retrofit, 2% will be to NFIT Passive House standard. We can't get Passive House alone. We have to do NFIT. It is a refurbishment and they're very, very old buildings. This will help us achieve a 50% reduction. It will provide research and development. It will train and upskill our delivery teams, which is very, very important. And I will come on to the upskilling of the workforce. You can put gadgets in all these properties, different things you can buy. It doesn't matter. It's all about the people that put this in. And if you can upskill your staff, and it's not even upskill, if you can get them as good as they were when they did their apprenticeship when they're 18 years old, then you've got your properties and it is relatively simple. And I compare this to driving. The day you pass your driving test, you are the best driver you'll ever be, and from that point onwards you go downhill. And you deteriorate every day until you get caught for speeding. And then you get fined, and you put on the speeding awareness course, and suddenly you become much, much better. As good as you were when you were 18, and you pass your test. This Passive House, for me, is a speeding awareness course of construction. This is upskilling the workforce to how they used to be. And they want to be there. They don't want to be for money doing the square meterage to just about pay their mortgage. They want to be working properly and efficiently and as good as they always were, as we all do. So the other thing we'll do, we'll promote our private rented portfolio as the best in the class. We are the, we're called Grosvenor GBI. We used to be called Grosvenor Estate. We are the largest private estate in London, possibly the UK, the privately owned estate. We hope to set the standard for others to follow, and we motivate delivery teams by providing clear target level of performance. And by clear target, I'm talking about the Passive House. It gives you a target to work for. It gives you a target that you can achieve, though it's very, very difficult. But it also motivates the workforce. It gives them the target, something they can go home with, something they can say they've achieved. I could make something up, but all it is me making something up. The Passive House is a target. BREEAM, much like LEED, I don't know much about LEED, but the BREEAM, the equivalent over there, I think is quite cheatable. You can dodge figures around, move figures around, and achieve it in relative ease. This was our first two Passivit properties. These two properties were built in 1860. They used to be gardeners' cottages. They're in Belgravia. They have one of London's lost rivers going under them, coming from the Serpentine, coming from Hampstead Heath through the Serpentine in Hyde Park and off to the Thames. So they crack in half. Every 20 years, these buildings completely crack in half and we have to repair them. But they're conservation and we wouldn't want to knock them down. They're part of the history of our estate. It's just a list of the people we used to get the NFIT. Here is another project we did, which is far, far more difficult. This is a typical Mayfair type property, a two-storey property above with what was stables below. I don't know if you know much about the London properties, but these back onto a huge house on Grosvenor Square, which is where the American Embassy is. Now, when this was built, I think it was about 1760 or 1730, these were stables. The horses lived below, where the black doors are. The hay was kept on the second floor, and the staff, the servants for the big properties, lived on the top floor. Now, of course, they're properties in their own right. This has got a value, I think, of about 5.6 million, this single property in the middle, number 13. We went for the passive house route here. The details of the consultants, though, I won't go into too much detail of how we did it, but it was quite an awkward job. So, this is the things we have worked on. It's a team built on trust and collaboration. When we started this, I read the Passive House book. It didn't mean anything to me. I couldn't understand it at all. It could have been written in Tiger. So I took the team off to a training course. And by the team, I mean the builders, the foremen, the QSs. Do you have QSs? The finance people, the estimators, the mechanical engineers. The whole team of about 25 of us went off to a training course. And what it gave me was a very, very balanced team. It wasn't an architect-led team. It was a team of people who challenged each other. So the architect, let's do this. The passive house consultant would say, no, I want to do this. And the builder would say, no, you can't do that. You can't forget building regs. Passive house has to comply with building regs. So I had a very balanced team. We didn't lose sight of the architectural design. You must remember this is a property in Mayfair. We don't want a second-rate property. The rent is £3,500 a week, I believe. So it must be quite a high quality. We always allowed for an airtightness champion. It looks like an awful lot of money in your prelims, but it pays. It pays for itself. The main contractor, subcontractors, myself, the client, everybody else, all attended the training. There was no holidays. Everybody came. As a careful sequencing of works, we protected vulnerable areas of membrane. And of course, you never lose sight of the bigger picture, which is the airtightness and relative humidity. Okay, the market reaction, this wasn't quite such a good thing. Our polls said that 32% of people were willing to pay for more sound insulation, but only 18% were willing to pay for more property with lower carbon emissions. The letting agents, we struggled. We couldn't find one of them could even understand what we'd done. We had to train those as well. Our approach to marketing promoted health and comfort benefits, not just energy saving. Use occupiers' evidence for future marketing and educate agents. The equivalent to new build standards within attractive period buildings. The quietness went from 80 decibels to 35 decibels. What's that say? 1 minute. Okay. Clean air. The air is 80% more efficient, which is very handy when you've got a taxi rank opposite of diesel taxis. Low energy bills, comfort from a lack of drafts, an ambient temperature, which is never below 70 degrees. My house is 11, so I'm always heating my house up to 17. Okay, this is the business case. We reduce costs, we engage the delivery team, invest in research and development, we capture long-term maintenance savings, reduce energy demand, increase income, we maximise income from renewables, appraise over long-term and track demand. Thank you.
So it's nice to have Michael and Stephen because it's both family-run real estate companies. And so we're going to ask Stuart Osborne from, again, back here on this side of the Atlantic, from NEVA. He's a founder of the NEVA companies, and talk about the work that they're doing, and then we'll roll into questions.
So thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. My name is Stuart Osborne again, and I'm an architect and developer as Tim and his company, and I have partnered up with my cohort, David Ruff, who's in the audience, and together we're NAVA companies. We've been together for a few years now, and we are developing this project, which is in Brooklyn. It's 210 Pacific Street. It's in the last months of being completed, and it is a condominium for sale product at the kind of upper end of the market. When we started this project, we knew that we wanted to build something that was energy intelligent, and we thought about leads, but found it to be kind of paperwork heavy, and it really wasn't about performance, and so we went towards the passive house standard. So I'll just describe quickly the building and also the reaction that we got from the market now that we've been in sales, which I found kind of curious. So this is a 28,000 square foot building. It's 7 stories. It's 8 condo units. So these are 3 to 5 bedroom units. We call them kind of horizontal townhouses. They range from 1,600 square feet to over 3,100 square feet for these units. Again, this is one of the larger units, again, over 3,100 square feet. We have parking for every unit. We have double height lobby space and rec room. In the cellar, we have private storage. We have a little gym for the residents. So then to talk about the passive house quality of this project, one thing the zoning forces into is a very blocky building. So it's 53 feet wide, 70 feet tall, and about 70 feet deep, which gives us a lot of interior floor area to kind of surface area, which is good for passive house and energy conservation in general. We're working on another project now in Manhattan that is a much taller, thin building, and it's going to be quite a challenge to create a passive house compliant building, given twice as much surface area to deal with. And as described in some of the other presentations, we used ICF formwork, which again, we found to be a great system that provides so many benefits in one shot. Very difficult to install, 7 stories in an urban infill condition. And we learned a lot of things about it along the way, but I think that it's actually quite a great system, and we would consider it again. So here's, again, kind of the formwork in place. You can see there's a thermally massive building. It's all poured concrete. And you can see the wall section. We have the typical kind of triple glaze passive house windows. And in this case, we had architectural shading around the windows that helps us with our heat gain, because that was one of the things that was really driving our energy efficiency, is just making sure that we could mitigate some of the solar heat gain that we were getting on the east, south, and west side of the building. Also, we have the typical ERV systems through Zender, and in order to maintain the indoor air quality. Here's again more of a kind of close-up of the building. Again, you can see the windows and the shading that we added. A couple other things that we did, which was additional to a passive house, is we have solar thermal on the roof that'll provide about 80% of the domestic hot water needs of the building, which we we're happy to do, and NYSERDA helped on the expense of that, so it was quite a good little amenity to the building. We also have in the garage, we have EV charging stations for anyone who would come in and possibly have a electric car that go back to their meter, so it's direct to them. One thing that we didn't do is we did not include gas in the building, which, being a for sale high-end condo, we were a little bit cautious about and felt it was a bit precarious because of our buyers. But ultimately, that didn't prove to be a problem for us, which we found kind of interesting. A few people asked about it, but once they kind of saw the slick induction cooking that we were using, they kind of let that go. Let's see what we got next. So one thing that we did when we were marketing the building is we really wanted to sell passive house. We thought that this was a great thing to distinguish us from our competitors. We felt it was a real hallmark of what we were up to, and also as just part of the ethos of our company to be engaged in something that we felt was kind of forward thinking as opposed to building a more standard product. Currently we're 75% sold, and we'll finish up the building again towards the end of the year. And throughout all of our marketing, again, we put passive house very prominently. It was big signage on the building. It's all over our website. And we even have a kind of educational component to all of that. We wanted to make sure that when people saw this, they kind of learned something, not only about the building, but also about passive house, which again, we thought that this was something, a kind of marketing angle that was very attractive to us as architects and developers, but we thought it would be attractive as well to the buyers. So in the end, speaking with our sales crew, we wanted to get their reaction and the buyer's reaction. did the consumers respond? Did our marketing work? Did it increase interest? And the ultimate kind of as developers for profit projects, was this something that we really benefited financially from at the end? Well, the response from the media was very good. We got a lot of attention for it, and we got written up X, Y, and Z, and people paid attention to that. So that was good. It was a lot of free press for us, which we were happy about. But did buyers see an opportunity to really be part of the, I guess, the solution of global climate change, or were they really uninterested? And again, speaking with our brokers, the answer was just a big fat no. No one really cared, which I found really surprising and a little disappointing. One of the buyers thought it was pretty cool. And I think they thought it was cool from the tech side, not from the standpoint of it was really kind of saving energy, and it was a more kind of intelligent way to build. So again, from our position, we were it was demonstrated to us that location and the product of your real estate was really what mattered to this audience. Which again was a bit disappointing, but at the same time, I think that's par for the course in America with cheap energy and a kind of ethos of that's kind of normal and expected, and it's fine. So will that change? I'm actually quite interested in the next panel that has a lot to do with where government or local government's going to be going on that. But again, we were quite surprised to find that it was not really part of the buying public psyche or their consciousness when they come out to buy their real estate. Thank you.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I would like to open up some questions and explore this issue, the idea of passive house relative to the broader issues of sustainability by first noting that in the United States we have around 115 million residential housing units. And in any given year when the economy is decent, we add about 3% to our US building stock. And as you might know, between residential and commercial buildings, the energy represent 40%, roughly 40% of the energy consumption in the United States. Tim described with his map and public policy a path to going to scale through public policy as a mechanism, at least for affordable housing. And in the meantime, Steve represents a small family-owned organization, I don't know how small, but 5'8", 5'9", that is like what most of the real estate developers in the United States look like. So as we explore this question of how do we go to scale, including but not just exclusively in terms of public policy for affordable housing, let's start with Steve and asking him to describe a little bit more how his family transitioned from building what he described as standard construction to something that really represents a very different mindset, as well as combination of technologies and engineering approaches.
Well, I guess the answer is fairly simple. Speaking personally, I spent several decades in the field working or supervising construction of buildings, and it gave me a very good insight as to what worked and, more importantly, what didn't work. And at some point in time, I started showing up at more conferences like this over and over and learning about new materials and products and methods. And one at a time, literally one at a time, bringing them back to my partners and saying, let's try this because fill in the blank. And whether it was a mason that kept scattering stuff all over the site and getting us violations and causing us a lot of extra labor and debris, or whether it was plumbers who said they knew how to solder pipe but they really didn't and created major damage at the end of the job, which is one of the reasons we are now going and using VRF systems for all heating and cooling in all projects going forward is because the hydronic systems leak. And you can get gas leak also, but so it's basically a trial and error learning process, and learning that quite a few things can work if you research them carefully enough.
Great. Others want to comment on either that or the other extent of the question and the issue?
I'll just say that the project that I'm working on, I like to call it little p policy, because it's not the most fascinating thing about these agencies. The reason why they can put something like passive house points into their QAP is they're as an option, it's not policy, is because of that wonderful American competition. It's as simple as that. So for me, this policy isn't just about setting down a law, it's that combined with there are very few resources, tax credit resources. So if the Republicans just keep cutting, tax credits out of the country, which is what they keep doing, then there'll be that much more competition for those very few resources. So the combination of those two allows for innovation. And as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing better than that. It's actually better than policy, better than stating that you have to do it this way.
We don't tend to have any tax breaks or grants in England. We don't have tax breaks or grants or any subsidies in England. And I don't think policy drives it. I think individuals drive it. In our company, I drove Passive House. In a company of 500 people, no one knew what it was. They got used to BREEAM. It took them a while. But I just said, no, we need to go better than that, and we need to achieve this. There's no legislation telling us to do it. There's nothing there to help us. So I think it's all about individuals. If enough people will push it themselves, you won't need your tax breaks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess to follow up on something what Tim said and kind of the little p, one thing that I think is one of the best policies in the recent years in New York City is in the previous administration, they incentivized developers and builders to build better. And they did that with very simple rules of saying if you increase your insulation R values in walls, we're going to give you a slightly bigger building, which I think there's probably a handful of developers out there who don't know that at this point, and everyone's partaken in that simple incentive, extremely effective way to create policy that has a huge impact, and I would say a very minor kind of cost impact, and creates better buildings, and which it's not passive house, but it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Stuart, you said that the brokers said no value in marketing that. You've done well, it sounds like, with the sales, but as I often think, you could build a high-rise tent in New York City and it would rent out or sell in no time. Would you continue to do passive house despite the fact that, at least from the broker's perspective?
Sure. In some respects, the passive house is for my partner David and I. It's what we believe in and what we really want to be part of. And the fact that it didn't find any kind of traction in the sales market was disappointing, but at the same time, it's not a deterrent to us. And I do, expect that will change as all, consciousness about energy and buildings changes.
Right. Can any of you comment on the sources of capital or the nature of your partnerships and how you may have had barriers in selling this concept? And the idea of it, which undoubtedly was new to a lot of the stakeholders behind your projects, in order to move that forward, and what that might imply for those in the room who are also in commercial real estate and have financial stakeholders with even deeper or more institutional foundations, such as the pension funds and insurance companies that are large sources of capital for commercial real estate investment.
I'll chip away at a tiny bit of what you just asked. So we are often building affordable housing, working with a lot of agencies in New York City, New York State, and everyone gets green, passive, they all understand it, they all love it. But when it comes to dollars and cents, their portfolio managers look at their whole portfolio and assume that everyone's going to finish the building and it's going to cost X to operate it, which means we have to escrow money, we have to put money aside because they're expecting us to perform poorly. And in fact, we perform great, but the money is still sitting there. Their money and our money is just being tied up because they can't seem to get with it and understand what this is about. So if there's any agency folks in the room, and I know there's a couple, can figure out how to get their portfolio managers to wrap their arms around this, it'll be more buildings for all of us to do.
Right?
From our point of view, we don't really raise funds. We own a lot of property, and we're quite a cash-rich company as well. We put money. I'm in a bubble to a certain extent. I understand what you're saying, but I'm in a small little bubble of my own. And it's quite a fortunate position to be in, whereas because I can say I think we should be doing this, and someone will say, well, yes, I agree with you, and X amount of pounds we put aside to do that. In terms of what you were saying about letting, we're in it for the long game. We haven't seen an uplift in rents. The rents are quite extortionate anyway. The market is overheating, so whether we've got more rental value than we wanted, we don't know, because the market is increasing on a daily basis in London. Rents are. But we're here for 10 years. We're going to stay with it for 10 years. I think we want to be in a position where people are coming to us and saying, have you got a passive house? At the moment, they're running away.
Our approach has been, when it comes to the affordable housing part of things, that's a completely separate conversation. But on our own development projects, we typically have worked in more edge-like neighborhoods. In other words, we go to those neighborhoods because the land is cheap and we get to experiment and do what we do. But as anybody knows who knows anything about development, when a pro forma, you can create a pro forma that says, I'm going to spend this much, I'm going to get this much, whether it's through sales or rentals. It goes to the lender, and the lender decides whether that information is correct or not. Because appraisers are God, because an appraiser says, you won't get this per month, you'll get this. And so our experience has always been, which is why our experience has always been that we have to build it at comparable costs, because there is no room. There's no room to have any additional rent, and there's no room, therefore, no room to have any additional costs. So frankly, we don't tell lenders that we're doing what we're doing.
We have the same issue. We don't have institutional funds. It's all private funds, and like Tim said, we just kind of bury all this in the spreadsheets. It's something that we don't cop to, and because none of them are here at this conference, they'll never know. And again, it's something that, because it's also a high-end product, those costs are so incremental that it's nothing that's really driving any decisions. And so it's easy for us to kind of be passive house, pro-passive house, without it really affecting our partners at all.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I do want to add one thing, that we have a very large project that we're going to start on this year, a market rate development rental. And the bank, to their credit, I'm not going to tell you the name of the bank, but it starts with JP. They said if we don't go lead silver, then they don't want to get into the deal. So I'm waiting for the conversation when I can get across the table and say, forget about the lead, let's talk about passive. Mm-hmm. And I'll let you know what happens when that conversation happens.
It has been interesting how some certifications become proxy for other things without the organizations using that proxy or that certification to actually understand what's inside. Let me turn the microphone or to you and ask if we have a couple more minutes. Question, madam, right here. Yeah. Well, let me just reintroduce the subject. The question was about resiliency and whether it's related to the long-term hold of the property or short-term occupant comfort as a component of resilience. If the people on the panel, gentlemen on the panel, could comment on that a little.
In terms of long term, you've probably come to the right person. Passive house really, for me, it deals with fabric of the building. And that's all I'm interested in. I'm not interested in a £30,000 kitchen. The buildings have been there for 300 possibly years. I've been given the privilege of looking after them for 20 years till I retire. And I don't want to destroy them for the next 300 years. So for me, and I didn't quite hear the question fully, but I assume I'm answering it. Passive house looks after the fabric, it looks after the forensics, it deals with the piece of the building that I'm interested in. And if that helps me, whereas Brianne might deal with water, you can use this dishwasher, you can't use that washing machine. I can do that, I can add up. I learned that at school. What I can't do is the forensics and understand the building, and Passive House helps me with that. And that, for me, gives it is a long-term solution to a long-term problem. So if this can keep our buildings up for 300 years, I'm in.
Great, thank you very much, gentlemen. Thank you, everyone in the. One question right here.
Would you like this microphone?
I think the question is, Stuart in particular, have you reached out to Rebney and talked to them about Passive House? And yeah. Yeah, so the question in particular was, at least through Rebney, the gentlewoman sees an opportunity for the brokers to become better educated, and wondering your perspective on that. And before you answer, I would just say that the appraisers and the brokers, ever since the launch of whether it was Energy Star or LEED, 1998, 99, they've always been kind of distant, or we'll get to that eventually. And I think eventually is here, but Stuart, what do you think?
Yeah, and in fact, our brokers were quite educated about it because they were involved in the entire marketing process. So they, we told them what Passive House was. We made sure they understand the benefits of the sound insulation quality, so that you can block out the noisy urban context, and the temperatures that are going to stay very relatively the same over the course of the year. And so they were able to talk about it, but it really was, I think, the part that surprised me on the buyer side was that the energy part of the equation was just didn't register. I think that they liked the fact that they're in what they could consider a better built building, and that would have these these benefits in terms of indoor air comfort and what have you. But they did not, the energy part of it just was not interesting.
Okay. I think, I'm sorry.
Well, I just want to add, so on this large project that's coming up, the market rate, a marketing consultant that we hired, we sort of asked him the same question. We said, well, what if we take this thing to Passive House? He said, his response was, people aren't going to get it. They're not focused in on that yet. He said, but if it's a large, this particular building is 250 units, and he said, as you start collecting data in that building and you use that data, social networking, whatever, to show what those numbers are, because those tenants in that building are going to pay for all their heating and cooling, and that'll roll out interest, and maybe you'll be able to capitalize that. But he said in advance he couldn't see doing it, just because the marketplace is just not thinking about it yet. Maybe we need higher heating and cooling costs. I don't know.
An appraiser once said to us on one of our earlier projects, when we explained, the envelope and the systems and the higher quality, He said, well, that's kind of like having a gold-plated faucet. You don't really need a gold-plated faucet. You could just do with a regular nickel-plated faucet. So I can't really talk about it as being anything more, worth any more money than that nickel-plated faucet. So we got a long way to go when it comes to that end of things.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Gentlemen on the stage, thank you. Sponsors, thank you.